This is ESG Decoded, the podcast powered by Global Affairs Associates to provide relevant, actionable updates related to business innovation and sustainability. Join Kaitlyn Allen and Amanda Shea of Global Affairs Associates for thoughtful, nuanced conversations with industry leaders that explore the complexities, the risks, and the opportunities connected to all things ESG. I'm Yvonne Harris, a consultant and co-host, and I will be collaborating with Kaitlyn and Amanda for the discussions that we will present on this podcast. Put simply, ESG is everything that is not on your balance sheet. This leaves room for misunderstanding, oversimplification, and the tendency towards one-size-fits-all perspectives. None of that will happen on this podcast. Enjoy this episode.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to ESG Decoded. I'm your host, Kaitlyn Allen, and today we have a really big announcement to make at Global Affairs Associates. We could not be more thrilled to announce that we have been acquired by ClimeCo. ClimeCo is a leader in the management and development of environmental commodities and the deployment of sustainability solutions. You will learn all about ClimeCo on this episode, and we could not be more excited to welcome Bill Flederbach, the co-founder, president, and CEO of ClimeCo, and Emily Damon, vice president of sustainability policy and advisory, to the podcast today. Thanks so much for being here.
Yeah, good morning, Kaitlyn.
Great to be here.
So I'll just begin by introducing Bill and Emily really quickly, and then we're going to go through the acquisition thesis so that everyone can really understand what the combined company is able to do. We, have been thinking about this for a while in terms of what's the next step for our clients. We do ESG consulting, strategy, communications, reporting, and what's that next step that they need to actually move down through their journey and continue on. So we just couldn't be happier about this. So let me introduce Bill first. Bill Flederbach co-founded ClimeCo in 2009, and 3 years later acquired all company shares to assume full ownership. Under his charge, ClimeCo has grown rapidly from a pioneer in N2O abatement projects to a respected leader in the environmental commodities market. Prior to founding ClimeCo, Bill worked in the international carbon markets, holding senior management positions at MGM International and AgCert. Before that, he founded and led the air quality management practice for OVG, a private engineering consulting firm. And Bill has a very fun fact in his past studies that I wanted to ask about. Bill is actually a meteorologist by training. So Bill, tell us a little bit about that.
All right. Yeah, when I was younger and deciding what I wanted to do before I went into college, I actually wanted to be a pilot, believe it or not, Kaitlyn. And there is two pathways to become a pilot. One is aeronautical engineering, or another one was meteorology. And oftentimes Air Force was pulling out of both of those programs. So that's really why I initially went into meteorology. And then I decided that I didn't want to be a pilot. And I wasn't the best at forecasting the weather, Kaitlyn. So I decided that I better focus on atmospheric chemistry and atmospheric pollution and climate change related studies, which is why I ultimately followed the air quality and climate path that I took.
That's super cool. Well, I just think it's one of those things that has a bit of a cachet to it of meteorology. And I'm trying to picture you like on the news talking about the weather.
Yeah, I think I have a radio voice, but I can't sing a tune. So I'm not sure I would have been good on TV. But
well, you're really good at what you do at ClimeCo, so we'll take it. And then Emily Damon. So Emily specializes in ESG performance and disclosure, helping clients capitalize on growing stakeholder interest. Her work spans reporting, materiality assessment, rating and ranking optimization, and risk assessment. She also has deep experience in corporate climate strategy, including greenhouse gas accounting, target setting, abatement strategy, energy efficiency, and renewable energy. Before joining ClimeCo, Emily spent over a dozen years in sustainability consulting, most recently leading Guidehouse's ESG practice in North America. Emily has some really fun facts to share. So we're all pretty competitive in the consulting entrepreneurship world. Emily, where have you expressed that competitive spirit in the past?
Thanks, Kaitlyn. One of the things that I spent an extreme amount of time on as a kid and through college and for many years after college was sports. I had a particular passion for ultimate frisbee. I was really lucky to play for some of the best coaches in the game. I had some really amazing teams, and I even got to travel the world to play sports. And I think my teammates might attest that I got out a little bit of my competitive energy in that avenue. I'm not playing anymore. My knee joints couldn't take it any longer. So my competitiveness has somewhat found its way into work. But it was a really wonderful experience. And the jury is still out on whether I learned more in my classes in school or whether I learned more playing sports.
Awesome. Well, I think that sounds like a lot of fun, and maybe we should do that at the next all-team meeting. Do some frisbee.
It's on.
You can show us the way. Well, thank you both for joining me. So as I mentioned, Bill is the president and CEO of ClimeCo, and Emily leads the business unit focused on consulting. So let's just start by having Bill give a brief overview of ClimeCo's 3 business units, and then we can go into the discussion of the thesis of this acquisition. Bill, hand it over to you.
All right. Thanks, Kaitlyn. When, Kaitlyn, you had mentioned that I was in some of the global carbon markets before ClimeCo, and that stemmed with AgCert and a little brief stint with MGM International. But one of the things that one of my takeaways when I came out of those companies and started ClimeCo is that first and foremost, we really wanted to build quality projects. We wanted to look at areas where we could create scalable greenhouse gas reductions to really manage that marginal cost. And we did that by entering the petrochemical space as a project developer. You had mentioned N2O. It's also known as nitrous oxide or laughing gas, but it's actually a very potent greenhouse gas. And we focused on technologies to mitigate that or destroy that, oxidize that. And as a result of that, we created protocols with the registries. We became a leader in offset development creation and ultimately issued millions of tons. We issue millions of tons every year from these project types still today. So that was the foundation of ClimeCo, is that because my experiences internationally with other companies is that they were all about talking a story and creating letters of intents and memos of understanding, looking to build projects, but they really failed to build quality projects and really harvest large volumes of high quality offsets. So our main focus was just to build quality projects first. And I think with that development of the project development aspect of ClimeCo, we also realized that we were generating a significant amount of offsets. So we didn't want to continue to pay brokers to educate the market on our offset types because we could communicate that better than they could. So we started to realize that we wanted to have a transactional practice within our firm as well. Folks that really understood what we were generating could go out and market it because 13 years ago, voluntary offset market really didn't exist. So we were pioneers in that, and we needed to, be able to socialize that and market it well. And we built on the transactional practice, which today has really grown, not only to market our own credits, but also to buy and sell and to repackage into customized portfolios for our clients around the globe. So that's really taken off. And, I think lastly, before I started the path into the climate world, I spent 16 years as a consulting engineer at OBG, you had mentioned, Kaitlyn. So certainly I knew all about consulting. And one of the things that our clients were asking us was to assist them in some advisory services in our early years. And we've certainly developed that over time. Some of those services surrounded, our clients asking us to assist them in areas where there is potential compliant cap and trade markets like California, other provinces in Canada. So we started to help our clients understand or to help them navigate what that future looked like under potential cap and trade markets, under the federal programs as well. During the Obama administration, the Waxman-Markey bill was a prevalent potential bill that almost made it through Congress. So we were educating our clients on that bill. And we started to realize that advisory part of our business was almost a really nice entry into new clients. So we could advise them and then also start to deliver project development expertise as well as transactional expertise. So I think that kind of summarizes, Kaitlyn, as far as the growth of the firm. It really started, the roots were project development. I always still say I'm proud of what we build. We build really quality projects, and then it really grew from there.
That's really cool, Bill. And so just to give that summary back to our listeners, so the 3 business units are project development. So actually the physical, technical projects that actually reduce emissions. 2 is the environmental commodities transactions practice. So actually buying, selling, trading environmental commodities. And then the 3rd group is the sustainability policy and advisory group, which is broadly speaking, or for our listeners, perhaps benefit kind of the ESG consulting branch, although it does go a little bit beyond that into the general advisory as well. Did I summarize that well, Bill?
You sure did. Those are the 3 business units, and we really look at that vertical integration and kind of the journey of the customer, where they enter that alignment. And one thing I didn't mention, Kaitlyn, is that although we started in certain very highly technical project types as a developer, that's really expanded over time into methane to energy and massive landscape scale reforestation efforts. And so really, in fact, at one time, it's still on our website, I had created a blog about the importance of a balanced portfolio. Like balance in life is so important as is the balance of an offset portfolio as well.
I think that's something we might want to come back to, because that's actually something I talk about too with our clients, is just needing not only this high-tech stuff, but also nature-based solutions. And I don't know, is that sort of what you think of when you say that? That's what I think of when you said that.
I do. Yeah. I kind of like the 2 story types. If you can stop the molecule before it goes into the atmosphere by looking at technologies to, destroy the greenhouse gas in the duct, if you will, in the process, that's fantastic, but also the balance of the understanding that, there is obviously a substantial amount of CO2 equivalent in the atmosphere. So whatever we could do to draw that down through sequestration technologies, nature-based solutions, like you said, Kaitlyn, is really important as well. So it's all about the balance.
Oh, that's really helpful. Thank you. Well, that kind of brings us to the thesis of this acquisition, right? And maybe Emily, we could give kind of a little brief background on meeting. And we actually had a client who we won't name here, but had a client that said to us, I think we had referred ClimeCo to them for help on the project development offsets front. And the client looked at me and said, you need to be doing what they're doing too. So I called up Emily, and that's kind of how it started, right, Emily?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it was really kind of meant to be, I think.
Yeah.
The reasons for this acquisition really mirror the reasons that I had when I joined ClimeCo at the beginning of this year. Prior to joining ClimeCo, I had been with Guidehouse, which was a large consulting firm, many thousands of people. I was leading the ESG practice in North America. So I would say fairly similar, Kaitlyn, to what you and Amanda and team had been up to. Sort of pure consulting basis, purely focused on ESG, did a whole lot of work on climate strategy for sure. But we did not have at Guidehouse the capabilities that Bill has just described with those other business units. We were not vertically integrated. We didn't have the ability to invest alongside our customers to actually put steel in the ground and reduce emissions. We didn't have the ability to procure the renewable energy credits that they almost always wanted after we had done their climate strategy work with them. So joining ClimeCo was, for me, was really driven by this ability to help my clients go further on the path toward the targets and objectives that they had set.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, that was the same thing. I know I had been thinking about it since at least last year at this time, probably before then, of thinking, obviously what we provide is highly valuable to our clients, but we kind of stop and we sit back and watch someone else implement or, take it all the way, like you said, to steel in the ground. And we thought, wow, wouldn't it be fun to really go on that journey with our clients all the way for example, to net zero, or all the way through achieving a reduction target. And so, I mean, I think the summary of the acquisition thesis, right, is ClimeCo's clients need us and our clients need ClimeCo, right? And I think that's already starting to be proven.
Yeah. And I would just add, Kaitlyn, as you just said, the clients that we have here already at ClimeCo, the expertise that the GAA team has brought is really something that they've been hungry for. So the consulting team that we've developed and really expanded a lot this year, we've got a very deep bench on climate strategy work. We do span the spectrum of ESG services. We've done materiality assessment, but GAA's capabilities on the reporting front, as well as sort of broader ESG strategy, and similarly GAA's sort of client segments. So your deep expertise with oil and gas companies, your deep expertise in the capital markets, those are all things that we're really excited to be adding to the team.
Yeah, and I would just add to that, Kaitlyn, I remember a couple of years ago, we were brainstorming, this is before Emily joined us, we were brainstorming, the vision of ClimeCo and looking at the policy team and realizing that our clients were asking us time and time again about sustainability questions, ESG, and what part of that spectrum do we cover? And it was really a conscious decision a couple of years back to say, we need to be a leader in sustainability. We need to add that to our core competence, because I think that's going to be the entrance into a lot of customers where they could begin the journey with us. And that was really critical. And I think when we met you, Kaitlyn, just the energy of you and Amanda and your customer base and your team, we're really always we're close to oil and gas. We represent a lot of oil and gas, that industry, energy, chemical, petrochemical, so I really like, I used to live in Houston myself. We really like that market in your core customer base is really important customer base of ours as well. So I think not only were the skill sets complementary and additive with your team, your client base is one that is really important to us as well. So it really was a great fit. I remember when we met together down in Houston for our first lunch, I kind of knew at that point, Kaitlyn, that something really exciting was going to happen.
Yeah, it was pretty cool. The signs were all over the place there.
Yeah.
And I mean, I remember when you said you live in Lake Placid, my jaw dropped, because that's my mom is from that region of New York. And, I spent summers in Messina, New York and Lake Placid, New York. So that was a big sign. But those are the sort of little hints that you get that, this feels really good.
Yeah.
Right. These are my people.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is awesome. I mean, I think obviously we feel the same way. We're so excited to be part of this fantastic team. We're loving the culture. It's very similar to our culture. And I think that sort of flexibility and entrepreneurship within a larger organization than ours is so exciting to be a part of. So I was thinking maybe we could just give an example right now too. So why, for example, would an ESG consulting client need project generation or need environmental commodities? Emily, do you want to take that?
Love to. Sure. Thanks, Kaitlyn. So Bill and I actually were just talking with a potential client yesterday. They're very early in their sustainability journey. They've had many years of being a publicly traded industrial company. They've got solid governance. They have many initiatives that are quite strong within ESG, but they haven't really taken the step to wrap their arms around all of it, put forth a coherent ESG strategy. They haven't really benchmarked themselves against peers. So Bill and I were just walking just yesterday with them through what are some of those early steps that can really help accelerate your progress, improve your performance, and the recognition that you're getting for things that you're doing within the realm of ESG. And what we talked about is this sequence that I think we often are somewhere along the sequence with most of our clients. So take any given priority ESG issue, and I think climate is a really easy example. That's one where we're often being engaged, and that's one where investor interest is high and getting higher by the day. and not an ESG issue that we see wavering in its importance going forward. So on a subject like climate strategy for a company, a great starting point is number one, establish where you are. What impact are you having? What contribution are you making to the issues of climate change today? And that would be a greenhouse gas baseline typically. Number two, then where would you like to be as opposed to where you are now? And that would be a target setting exercise, which could entail looking at what types of targets your peers have set, what types of targets your customers may be requesting. That could be a science-based target, that could be a net zero target, that could be a carbon neutral target, you name it, but establishing where you're trying to get to in terms of your climate impact is sort of the next step. After that comes an abatement strategy. So, okay, you know where you are, you know where you want to be. How will you get there? What are the sort of tools you have access to that might move you along that path? Renewable energy, I had alluded to earlier, that's often a component of a company's abatement strategy. It's can be one of the easier sort of plug-in solutions, especially with an environmental commodity like a REC, a renewable energy credit. A company can fairly quickly use, pay some amount for RECs to cover their electricity usage, and then state that their percent of renewable electricity has increased, and therefore their greenhouse gas emissions have gone down. But it gets trickier pretty quickly. And I think a lot of companies, even ones who haven't had a long-standing ESG program, a lot of companies for economic reasons have pursued a lot of energy efficiency projects, have maybe sort of taken up or used up all of the low-hanging fruit when it comes to things that reduce energy usage or reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So that's where the project development team and our environmental commodities team come into play in many cases for companies with a climate strategy. They've figured out where they are, where they want to be, and part of how they will get there might involve, let's say, putting steel in the ground to reduce emissions. Maybe there's some N2O emissions if they're an industrial facility producing nitric acid, for example. Maybe there's an opportunity for them to destroy those molecules before they go out the stack. Or maybe it's that they want to be looking at offsets to compensate for the emissions and the impact that they're continuing to have. So those are really natural places where our advisory team can then pass to the other teams within ClimeCo to figure out actually how do you implement and reduce your own emissions, or what sort of environmental commodities, renewable energy credits or carbon offsets, for example, what sort of commodities might you want to use as you work along your path to improve the impact you're having and be recognized for those efforts. How's that for an example?
Oh, that's awesome. No, that was so perfect, because that's really the journey, right? So and a lot of clients, right, they're just starting, right? They're like, where do we even begin, right? But getting from there all the way, I've been saying, how do you get all the way to net zero? And not even necessarily net zero, right? Maybe it's a different type of target, but how do you actually get there? And I remember one of the first things that I saw of ClimeCo's work that was so impressive was this marginal abatement cost curve, and just actually seeing some of the quantitative work behind a decarbonization plan or behind a net zero plan, which I think is precisely what companies need to know how to actually get there, right? So a lot of companies are putting out goals or targets because they need to, but they still don't quite know how they're going to get there, even for the nearer term ones. So kind of seeing that technical quantitative analysis, I thought was going to be really, really useful for our clients. That, and then just the how do you back up what you're saying, right? So with, an increased, I would say, scrutiny, both by investors, but also by the SEC in the US, by regulatory bodies, looking at these claims and saying, hey, how do you actually know that's not zero? Or how are you actually going to get there? Right. It's really, really important now more than ever to have something solid behind those claims. And that was something I saw that you guys showed us a little bit early on that I thought, wow, that's definitely something that is useful and more necessary than ever.
Absolutely.
Just one area, Kaitlyn, just to enhance what Emily had said is, we always, understanding the marginal cost of abatement at our clients' facilities, there's always that key decision is, what is it going to cost me to reduce my emissions? Does it make sense to reduce the emissions within our fence? Is it affordable? Can we approach it? Are the technologies there for us to be able to do that? So we always look at, that strategy first, is you kind of like looking under the hood, looking at your own house first, like what can I do? And, sometimes we identify some fantastic projects within the fence that make sense. Sometimes we identify projects within the fence that may be really expensive, and there are technologies out there, but the client is really looking for financial support in order to implement these very scalable projects. And oftentimes that's where we get involved in looking at, the voluntary offset markets. Is there a market where we can create a protocol for this technology, bring in the capital needed, and have the return on the project be the sale of those credits into the market? When that occurs and we can actually unlock technology and reduce scalable emissions through using the markets, that's fantastic. And I think so there are a lot of avenues to look at reducing emissions within the fence, but I would also say that our clients are really interested in also the story. Like if they're going to start to look at offsetting their emissions, story really matters. Story matters, meaning that, can we look at offsetting or creating a portfolio of reductions for them of offset credits within their supply chain? For instance, if we're working with auto manufacturers or car manufacturers, they may be interested in sourcing carbon credits from the manufacturer of performance plastics, which goes into the Tesla, for instance. And if there are reduction technologies associated with the manufacturer of a product that goes into their product ultimately within their supply chain, that story really resonates well with them. So I think story absolutely does matter. And sometimes it's really about also just like what feels right. I mean, we have some certain clients, Kaitlyn, that really do want nature-based and, really do look to support our landscape scale reforestation efforts. And one way they can do that with us is that they can, enter agreements where they're kind of locking into the credits coming off of a project. And once we have more certainty of future revenue, we can, invest the underlying capital to make the project happen ourselves. So there's a lot of different paths, but we call it a commodity, but I think it's anything but a commodity to our clients. I think it's an investment in the environment. It's an investment, to create a low carbon economy, but the stories really do matter.
Oh, that's awesome, Bill. Thank you so much. And I think, if any of our listeners have additional questions about this topic, obviously reach out online, because this is so much more than the headlines you see and the back and forth. Are offsets bad or offsets good? There's just so much more to it. And this really is, in my opinion, one of the mechanisms that we get to net zero, one of the most important. And so, really appreciate you kind of fleshing that out, Bill, for our listeners. Let me switch gears really quickly. So something super exciting that Bill just did and some of the ClimeCo team was actually attending COP26. So COP26, the Conference of the Parties, the 26th in Glasgow, just, I think, last week. Bill, would love to hear your takeaways.
Yeah, sounds great, Kaitlyn. And I would say, Kaitlyn, to you and the entire audience that, out of all the COPs out there, I've certainly been in the market for the last 15 COPs, but this is the first one I've gone to. And I think that tells a story by itself. Like why did ClimeCo not go to COP in the past? And I think one of the reasons why, honestly, Kaitlyn, is I thought it was not a solid investment for ClimeCo to go. I felt that it was really meant for delegates of countries. It was meant for those negotiating. It was meant for the folks that perhaps wanted to go out and create demonstrations, in the support of action in environmental groups. But I really never saw it as a great opportunity for our business. And so why now? Fast forward to COP26, why did ClimeCo send 4 people out when we've never gone before? And I think one of the things that we've seen that's really exciting to us is, since COVID, everything really started during COVID. I would say, I think there was a lot of acceleration in the voluntary carbon markets, during the Trump administration, honestly, because a lot of leaders and companies weren't seeing federal action, and they got tired of that lethargism of just waiting for federal action when there was a clear acknowledgement that that wasn't going to occur. We saw a lot of private industry starting to really voluntarily abate emissions during the Trump administration. And then, fast forward to COVID, there was that time when industry kind of globally shut down, and you hear the stories now of being able to see the Himalayas for the first time, and the air quality in Beijing actually cleared up, and the Earth. You saw a lot of the articles that the Earth actually got a little bit of a breather, and I think that there was a real attention to that. So, all of these forces really started to create this incredible momentum in the voluntary carbon market. So yes, there is always the market in the European Union emissions trading scheme. A lot of us are very comfortable with that, the EU ETS. There's always the market in California. There's a market in Alberta. There's a market in South Korea. There are these markets around the globe that are compliance related cap and trade markets. But in reality, most of the globe is covered outside of those markets. So the voluntary mechanisms are really important. And one of the reasons we went out there is that there's a lot of attention to scaling the voluntary carbon markets now. It's not about regulatory markets as much. It's about what countries can do, what companies can do to reduce their emissions under the voluntary market schemes, and how important of a role that's going to play if we hope to meet the 1.5 degree Celsius goal, which I think is, I hate to be a pessimist, but I think we have to do the best we can. I think we've already overshot that. It's going to be hard to ever achieve that. But I think, what can we do? And what I saw out in Glasgow this time is a ton of private industry out there, a ton of, so for us, it made a lot of sense, Kaitlyn, because we got to see and meet with a lot of our clients. A lot more attention was given to Glasgow than any other COP from the industrial, the energy side of the business. So I found it really fascinating to go out there. I was in the blue zone. Blue zone tickets were very, very hard to get. So out of the 4 folks that we sent, I got the blue zone. And what is the blue zone? So there's a blue and a green zone. So trying to navigate the COP is confusing. There's all these side events, trying to get your agenda ready to go so your days are efficiently spent is a real challenge. So I learned a lot, and but I was in the blue zone. That's where all the countries are. They have every country that wants to have a pavilion has one. They're talking about innovation in their country. It's fascinating, Kaitlyn and Emily, just to see the action. We were there on behalf of the International Emissions Trading Association, which is IETA, and we're members of IETA. So IETA, I think, received 103 delegate passes, so it was very difficult to get them. So, but I did enjoy my week in the blue zone. Once you were in the zone, you didn't tend to leave, because getting into the zone every day meant daily COVID testing. I've never tested myself so much, Kaitlyn. And but just your health passport to get into the event was cumbersome. So I think that just added to some of the complexities. We saw some great speakers out there. President Obama was out there speaking, which he's such an amazing speaker. A lot of folks were out there to listen to President Obama. But I think at the end, we did see some action. In fact, ClimeCo is summarizing for our clients, some of the Article 6. We talk about Article 6 quite a bit in the Paris Accord, and Article 6 is really kind of the rule book on how countries are going to approach the reduction of emissions, and whether or not there should be corresponding adjustments, and whether or not those emission reductions, even if they're voluntary, should count towards the country's ledger. So there's a lot of accounting principles in Article 6, and we're going to have some highlights coming out with respect to the outcomes of the negotiations. I think that there certainly was progress. I don't think as much as the market had hoped, but I think certainly that there was some progress, during the event. And so, my takeaway is that in just talking to others, that it was the most kind of the most visited or interactive COP with respect to not only global delegates or country delegates, but also the private sector, which I think is really important.
Yeah, I think that's a really good thing. I saw a lot of things on social media flying around about how bad it was that so many companies were there. I was like, do y'all not get it? Like that is exactly what we need to have happen, is to have the private sector, on board, interested, wanting to be part of the solution. So I think that's really cool. Yeah. Was there anything, Bill, that felt demotivating about it? Motivating versus demotivating?
I would say, I think everybody knows, all you have to say is Greta. And everybody knows the impact that Greta has made to the youth movement. I think that's really positive. But I think some of the demotivation that I had saw is, when Greta was leading protests, with Greenpeace, and it was really against the voluntary carbon markets and scaling the voluntary carbon markets, and about the board that serves to scale the voluntary carbon markets and maintain credibility. I think it's a little demotivating when you hear groups just slandering the quality of offsets and how important that's been. I call them kind of offset haters. So I think it's a component, to progress, and it does get. It gets a little frustrating, I think, when you see groups that are making positive impacts in one aspect of climate change, and their voice is important, and then their voice goes to really look at taking the credibility away from mechanisms that have really accelerated the reduction of greenhouse gases globally. So I think that's disheartening, but you're always going to see that, so I think it's our role to educate, and it's our role to listen and be professional about it. I mean, really listen and understand what people's concerns are, and address them the best we can based on our backgrounds. And I think the other item that I think was a little bit, from my perspective, a bit confusing, and I get concerned over the country ledger. So for instance, if ClimeCo is going to invest in a project in Southeast Asia or Asia, if there becomes a requirement that we need a country sign off to release those credits so we could sell them as an investor in the project outside of the country. So the transfer of voluntary carbon market or products out of the country with potential corresponding adjustment requirements could really be cumbersome and thwart investment. And I think at the end of the day, what we want investment into low carbon technology, into low carbon future. We don't want to be riddled with requirements of trying to deal with getting a sign off from a country just so we could monetize the carbon credits as a result of our investment. So I think we have to be careful, because sometimes it's, we want the balance sheet globally to be perfect, but the balance sheet won't be. But what we want more debits than credits. We want more reductions than increases. And I think that's paramount. So I do get concerned sometimes about bureaucracy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, right, in an ideal world, we have a global market that's seamlessly unified so that we can actually accelerate progress. And I can see how that would be not just demotivating, but also potentially very problematic for this really important mechanism for getting to the emissions reductions we need. Like you said earlier, the ledger matters somewhat, but what really matters is that we take greenhouse gases out of the atmosphere.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I think I also, just lastly, I would say that with all the countries being present, it was so amazing. Just the diversity of folks at Glasgow was so amazing. And the folks that we met, and sometimes you'd wonder, well, how, what's the day going to be like? Like, I may have 3 meetings, but I'm going to be in the blue zone. How am I going to fill my day? And I would say every day was filled by just meeting really creative folks and networking. So I was exhausted, Kaitlyn, at the end, so got kind of ready to get home. And then everybody had to make sure they had all the testing to get out of Scotland. And that wasn't easy for everybody. So I know one of our colleagues was stuck for 12 hours in Heathrow, just trying to get out, making sure that his health passport was accurate. It wasn't easy, the logistics, but it was well worth it. And next year it's in Egypt. And I look forward to ClimeCo's presence at the Egypt event. I'm not certain that we would send as many people because, again, I think the green zone, which is really where more of the public is it wasn't as active as we thought. So I think we would probably send as many that we can that aligns with the amount of blue zone tickets that we get. And, to your point, our association was called out. The IETA, International Emissions Trading Association, was called out for the 103 passes that they gave. To your point, that's some of the frustration. That's a little demotivating when you're thinking about, all of the constituents of IETA are major companies, including energy companies, oil and gas companies that have made commitments on their goals to reduce their carbon. They're there to learn, they're there to participate, but yet they're getting called out because they're industrial emitters. And I think that's just wrong.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, this has been such an awesome conversation. Emily, Bill, thank you so much for joining today. Pretty soon, y'all will see the updates to the ESG Decoded website and podcast socials, and reflecting our new status as Global Affairs Associates, a ClimeCo company. So look for that. And please do take a look at the website, climeco.com. There's so much to learn about, and there's a lot of really great information on ClimeCo's website. There's also ClimeCo Green, where you can start, offsetting your own footprint, which is really, really cool. And I guess that's it for today. Thank you so much, Emily and Bill. We'll be seeing you soon.
Thank you for listening to ESG Decoded. Subscribe to this podcast wherever you consume yours, and follow ESG Decoded and Global Affairs Associates across social media platforms. Until our next episode, take what you learned today to drive long-term value for your organization by doing good for people and for the planet.